very soon. Now, the four Democratic congresswomen told by President Trump to go back to where they came from have said his comments are a racist distraction from his failing policies. From later today, a sweeping new rule comes into force that's expected to prevent hundreds of thousands of migrants from claiming asylum. Now, the new rules say an alien who attempts to enter the United States across the southern border after failing to apply for protection in a third country is ineligible for asylum. Now, as you can see here, those from countries such as Honduras or El Salvador, they could not seek asylum in the US if they don't do so first and are denied in Guatemala or Mexico. But this would need an agreement with those latter countries, and that does not exist yet. Here's the Foreign Minister of Mexico, Marcelo Ebrard.
Being a safe third country would require Mexico's National Congress to pass an agreement with legal implications. So this can't be done in a unilateral manner by the US. It's bilateral. It could be multilateral, but it can't be done unilaterally.
Well, let's get more on this now. Christi Jackson has come into our studio. She's a lawyer specialising in immigration in the United States. So let's see, where shall we begin? What about this aspect that I was underlining there, that the Trump administration wants people, particularly Honduras, El Salvador, so a lot of the migrants that would be trying to make it to the United States, to first try and claim asylum in either Guatemala or Mexico, depending on which route they take?
Yeah, so I think the first problem that you have to look at is just geography. They're all going to come through Mexico, and the largest percentage of asylum seekers now are from the triangle of countries, the El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. So what you're effectively doing is forcing Mexico to make a decision. And the problem we have is those aren't safe countries. We still have asylum seekers from Mexico. So if you're granting asylum to someone from Mexico saying that their country isn't safe, how can we say someone further south of them is going to go to Mexico and be granted asylum there? So we can't force Mexico to do this. And they've, as you just said, have made it clear they're not interested in making that agreement.
I know in Guatemala it has been stopped in the courts about declaring it a third safe country. However, Mr. Trump has withheld aid in some of the Central American countries, which could be a stick to get the governments perhaps to agree to some of these measures. Can you see them going through and in the sense being implemented fully?
Well, they may be forced. That may be what we're doing. I think we saw that the Guatemalan courts stopped the process at the weekend on Sunday, and immediately Monday this new rule was on tap. They're ready. So I think they were anticipating that, and I think that's what they're trying to do, is just force the hand of the countries and really push the wall further and further south is effectively what's going to happen. But because of the numbers of immigrants coming from those countries, we'll effectively eliminate asylum claims.
Because what may happen is, if some of these migrants are considered economic migrants as opposed to legally we'd say allowed to have refugee status, it could be in fact that they could be returned. I mean, that is a process I think that the White House would also agree with.
It's already happening. So every single person seeking asylum will go through a credible fear interview at some point. One of the arguments that proponents of modifying the process, so the American Immigration Lawyers Association, for instance, pro-immigrant groups are saying, let's just put more officers there to weed out any non-credible claims and increase that so that we don't end up with this backlog at the detention centers. And that doesn't have to be, the solution doesn't have to be stopping all asylum.
But what do you think? The United Nations came out talking about the move being illegal. The American Civil Liberties Union saying they will sue. You would imagine that it would be a more clear-cut issue when it comes to the law of what is allowed and what is not.
You would imagine, but it's not how it is in the U.S. It is very confusing, and what's allowed and what's not allowed, and what special powers are given for things like national security. It all comes into play. We will see a lawsuit. If it hasn't already been filed yet, it's
still early,
it's opening time. It's coming. I'm sure it will be filed immediately, and I expect will create an injunction, much like all of the other, presidential proclamations we've seen and all these things that have been rolled out by executive order. I expect that we'll see this stopped at least until a court can decide. The question is, what will the court decide?
Yeah, really interesting. Christi Jackson, thanks so much for coming into us here. Yeah.